a little bit more about the program.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. I'm on about day 100 as the new CEO of Life Smart Youth. So still learning a lot and super excited though to be working back in the youth in a youth service agency. Life Smart Youth is in our 76th year of existence, formerly known as Social Health Association. And with your grant, we have been able to serve upwards of 200 eighth grade students in Marion County with our CARES program. And CARES stands for Communicating with and Respecting Each Other. And this is a 4-session program that is really aimed at helping our kids and also helping parents and teachers talk to young people about the importance of healthy relationships, and especially those dating relationships, where the CDC has reported that youth are entering into dating violence relationships at a high degree. And when this happens, our children end up experiencing domestic violence as they grow up, and they're more inclined to go toward drugs and alcohol. And so what we do in this 4-part session is go into the classroom. So we meet the kids where they are and provide them with the tools and the techniques and guidance on how to establish these healthy relationships. So all I can say is you're doing a great work, Kiwanians, to really instill great values into the future of our young people. So thank you. And if I have any questions, or if I'm allowed to take questions, I'm happy to do so.
Does anyone have any questions of Tammy? I'm just very impressed by what you're doing, and I'm so happy that you were the recipient of that grant. Thank you so much again for being here and telling us about the program.
Glad to be here.
Very well. Trina, I think we're ready to hear this, our special program person, Chris Denari. Everyone's looking forward to hearing from him today. I'll give you the floor to introduce Chris.
Perfect. Thank you so much. If you don't recognize his face, surely you'll know his voice. Chris Denari has been involved in broadcasting sports in Indianapolis for over 25 years, including 5 of Butler's recent NCAA Tournament appearances and the Bulldogs' first trip to the Sweet 16 in 2003. He's in his 15th season as the Pacers' television play-by-play announcer on Fox Sports Network. In his more than 35 years of broadcasting sports in Indianapolis, he started when he was about 8. Let's see. Chris has been named Indiana Sports Writer and Sportscaster Association Broadcaster of the Year in 2003 and was inducted into their Hall of Fame in 2016. His distinguished resume includes the WNBA's Indiana Fever, WXIN, Fox 59, Butler University, the Indianapolis Colts Radio Network, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network, Big Ten Network, and the IHSAA. In a 1979 graduate of Westfield High School, Chris was a member of the Wabash College NCAA Division III National Championship basketball team and was later inducted with his teammates into the Wabash College Athletic Hall of Fame. His service to the Indianapolis community is lengthy and includes the Joel Cornett Foundation, Special Olympics of Indiana, and the Hamilton County Humane Society. I first met Chris when I was a student at Butler, and he talked me into embodying Hank, the costumed mascot, in a pinch. It's my pleasure for you all to meet him as well. Chris, thank you for joining us.
There I am. Thank you very much, Trina. Thank you very, I was the Bulldog mascot as well once. I remember at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, we had the mascot became ill during the month of May. And this is when Dr. Jeffrey Bannister was the president. And I put the mascot on and did all the schmoozing and all that kind of stuff. And when everybody had left, I took the head off and put it, and Dr. Bannister looked at me and went, "Oh my goodness, it's you, Chris." I said, "Hey, you have to do what you have to do, right?" And that's exactly what I had to do. So Trina, I have been the mascot as well. Thank you very much for having me. It's ironic that, the Pacers made the news on Tuesday with the announcement of a new coach. We had the press conference yesterday. I'm going to have a chance to talk with Nate Bjorkgren a little bit later. I'm excited to talk to him. I've been impressed with what I've watched with him as an assistant with the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors won the NBA title 2 years ago with first-year head coach Nick Nurse. And then this year, despite losing Kawhi Leonard, they were probably as good or as talented as anybody else in the NBA. And Nate has played a huge role in that. And I think he's going to be a real asset to our organization. And I can't wait to meet with him. I'm going to talk to him a little bit later today. And so really anxious to talk to him and just pick his brain. I think for me, this will be the fifth coach going into my 15th year. My first year, I worked with Rick Carlisle. I worked with Jim O'Brien. I had a great relationship with those guys, Frank Vogel for 5.5 years, and Nate McMillan the last 4 years. And it's always sad to see someone leave. I had a really good relationship with Nate. I think he did a lot of great things for the organization. But at the end of the day, the Pacers weren't as successful in the postseason as you'd like to be. If you go back to 2013, 2014, the Pacers were in the Eastern Conference Finals back-to-back years, and that's where this organization wants to go back to. And so management felt a change was necessary, and Kevin Pritchard and his staff made the hire yesterday. I said that, to me, Nate is a little bit like these coaches I'm going to talk about. Eric Spoelstra, who's at Miami. Frank Vogel, of course, who coached the Pacers, just won a title with the Lakers. Nick Nurse, who won a title in Toronto. Brad Stevens, who was the coach at Butler, who I know very well, who's done very well with the Boston Celtics. All of these coaches have not played in the NBA, nor did many of them play high-level college basketball. Eric Spoelstra was a Division I player at Portland. When I was the voice of Butler, I did one of his games. Brad played at DePaul. Nick Nurse, all with small college feel, but they know the game. They know the game inside and out, and they bring an energy and an intensity. If you go back to Frank Vogel was a Division III player who decided that he wanted to be a coach, and so he went to Kentucky under Rick Pitino and was a graduate manager and worked his way in the NBA as a film guy, a video room guy, just like Eric Spoelstra. And so that's where these guys have come from. They really grind. And if you look at the track record of these coaches, they've been highly successful. You don't have to play in the NBA to be a successful coach. Now, we know that Larry Bird did a great job with the Pacers, Doc Rivers. I mean, we could go on and on about former players who have done a really good job as a coach. But you also have this sort of, I want to say, younger, new breed of coach that marries knowledge of the game, analytics, and those types of things. And they play an exciting, energetic brand of basketball. The thing I can tell you about what Nate brings, we played the Raptors back in February. And the Pacers were down big in the first quarter, had a 43-point second quarter, and had a really good-sized lead going into the third and the fourth quarter. And a lot of times in the regular season, if the lead gets to a certain number, because you're playing so many games and there's back-to-backs, teams will just say, man, I don't think we can come back. Well, that wasn't Toronto. They went to full-court pressure, zone trap, half-court zone defense. They were doing everything they could to get back in the game, and they did. And they rattled the Pacers, and they ended up beating Indiana in Toronto. I had watched that from afar. I hated watching it that night because you were seeing the Pacers sort of wither against the pressure. But that's what Nate is all about, Nate Bjorkgren, and how he learned from Nick Nurse. This is a guy that, again, I'm really excited to meet, excited to talk to. I think he's got a really good group to work with. I mean, this has been a team. If you look at the Pacers organization over the years, I mean, it's a team that's in the playoffs virtually every year and has had a lot of success. Have they won a title? No. But I think being knocked out of the first round each of the last 4 years and the last 2 years being swept, it didn't taste very good. And so with this current group of players, who I think is very good, I think it's the right time to make a change and to move forward and to go forward like that. I'll take questions as we go on later. The one thing that I wanted to do was, I guess, share my experiences in a different type of year in doing games and being a broadcaster, just as we're sharing here via Zoom. I've done many a presentation in front of groups where there's a lunch, as you said. I've talked to the Broad Ripple Kiwanis Club many, many times, and I love to talk to people throughout the city. But one of the things that's been far different is how we did games. I'll just take you back to March. My wife and I had just come in off about a 12-day road trip. We had beaten Dallas in the final game of that road trip to go 4-1. And then we played Brad Stevens and the Celtics on Tuesday night, and the Celtics won. And the next day, my wife and I were driving to Muncie to visit and have dinner with our college senior, Max, at Ball State. And that's when I found out Rudy Gobert tested positive with COVID-19. And I turned to my wife in the car and I said, well, I think that's it. She goes, what are you talking about? I said, I think the NBA will shut it down. You can't take a chance. We don't know what's going on. And we were driving home that night and listened to ESPN, and boom, there it was. And as we all know, that changed sports, but it changed, how we all have lived, how we all have communicated, how we all have done our work. And so for us, it put us on hiatus until the NBA agreed to go down to Orlando to the bubble, where, by the way, they had not one positive COVID-19 test. We knew that it would never be the local RSNs or the local broadcasters to go to Orlando. That would just be too risky, too chancy to have too many people down there. But we knew that we were going to do the games. And so we did the games basically in the studio at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. And I have some pictures here that I'm going to share if I can. Let's see, did I screen share? But now, do you see that? Okay. So this is the studio. And so you can see me and you can see Quinn. That's how we were set up. This was the screen that we watched the game off of. And we had 4 screens down here with replay. I could have an all 10, just different things that we could see. This was Quinn and I on camera, and you saw the virtual fans that the NBA created. And then this was a picture I took of Eddie Gill. So you could basically just see where we were set up and how we watched the game. I did 15 of these games from August 1 to August 24th. We did 3 scrimmages on Pacers.com, 8 regular season games on Fox Sports Indiana, and another 4 playoff games. So we basically had a game every other day, and this is where we went. What has happened in sports is everybody's done a great job. If you remember, for the first big sporting event after the pandemic was the NFL draft. And that was done by ESPN with virtually everybody at home, general managers, coaches, presidents, and it was fantastic. And I think what's happened is with technology, you have found you can do this. I got my oil changed somewhere in the midst of that schedule of the 15 games in 30 days. And I was at my dealership and I was going to get my car, and a gentleman, as I was leaving, said, "Hey, when are you flying back to Orlando?" I go, "I'm not." He goes, "I just saw you 2 days ago doing the game." And I said, "Well, I was doing it here in Indianapolis." He goes, "I would have never known." And I said, "That's the goal. That's what we were trying to do." Now, we weren't going to fib or not tell or, act like we were there. I mean, you can see, and we would always say we're in our Indianapolis studio. But if you just tuned into a game, and again, you don't see us very much, you would have never known, hopefully. I mean, the mix of the audio and all those kinds of things, our crew and staff did a fantastic job. And basically that's what you're seeing throughout the country with everything you watch. Even though the World Series right now, you see Joe Buck and John Smoltz in Texas doing the games, for the longest time, those guys were doing it at home. I watched an ESPN regular season baseball game during the summer, and the play-by-play announcer was in Connecticut. Rick Sutcliffe, one of the analysts, was in San Diego, and Chipper Jones, the former Brave, was in Atlanta. A buddy of mine, Brandon Gaudin, who, like me, was a one-time voice of Butler basketball. He now works for Big Ten Network. He does football games for Fox. He said he'll probably be doing Big Ten basketball games from his house. He will not travel to the arena. He will do it from his house. So it has changed clearly the way that we're doing games. Just like you, I'm hopeful we get back to doing the games as we've done them, right there courtside. But for me, the opportunity to do these games was more important than being there. And I understand the safety protocols, and we all bought in. But the fact of the matter was, without fans in the arena, we knew how important our role was, because this is the way that people are consuming the games. Right now, you're not going to, the Colts are having minimal numbers now. At the time, you were not going to live sporting events. So TV became very important. One other thing from a broadcasting standpoint, I'll just go down. I've been the Turn 4 announcer at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for almost 20 years. I've been a part of the network for 22 years. This is my location in Turn 4 for the Indianapolis 500. I also do the Brickyard. This is what it looked like on race day for me. So if you can see that, you see the cars. These were during the pace laps. Yes, this is the actual race. This is not practice. This was the Indianapolis 500. A funny story is on race day, when I went to get my equipment and I walked out to Turn 4, I started climbing the seats in getting into my position. And I noticed that all of a sudden I'd been up there getting my equipment for about two to 5 minutes, and all of a sudden security was walking up. And I thought they were just coming up to say hello. And the security guy goes, "Who are you?" I go, "I'm Chris Denari. I'm the Turn 4 announcer." He goes, "With who?" And I go, "Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network." Well, what had happened is, up on the 9th floor of the pagoda where security is, they saw this guy walking up the steps in a backpack with no one else around. And I'm sure they were thinking, "Hey, what's going on here?" But it showed you the level of security and the level of caution that everyone was going through. And, normally I'm walking out there and there's thousands of people out there, but I was the only one. So, I thought I would share that just so that you get a feel, one, for how we did Pacers games, and two, what it was like, at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So for me, I'm getting ready to enter my 15th year in a year that we don't know when it's going to start. We think it'll be January. The NBA is hopeful that at some point that they can have fans. I think we all know it's much different being in an inside venue than it is in an outside venue. So for me, what I'm trying to do is stay busy as far as continuing to just update team rosters and all those kinds of things. As free agency and the draft come, I will work on that. But, clearly I've been as much a landscaper around my house as I have been a broadcaster. I've tried to engage as much as possible in situations like this with members of the community, with our fans, with our sponsors. But it has been different. There's no question about it. But at the end of the day, hopefully when January comes and we're playing what we hope is an 82 game schedule, hopefully with 41 at home and 41 on the road, I'll be chomping at the bit ready to go. For those of you that don't know, again, as Trina said, I was the longtime voice of Butler basketball for 17 years. I was their first director of sports marketing back in 1989. I can tell you that when I took the Butler job in 1989, it is not the Butler you know now. They were not successful at all in basketball. They had no corporate partners. Think about it now. The field house has been renovated twice. They've been to the national championship game twice. They've gone from the MCC to the Big East. Laval Jordan, who's the current coach, was a player when I was a broadcaster. Barry Collier, the AD, was the first-year coach in 1989 when I took over. So Butler basketball has played a huge role in my life. With the success that they had through the years into the 90s when they went to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 35 years. That was huge for my career because without the success of Butler, and they didn't have games on TV at the time, you had to listen to radio. If you wanted to follow Butler, you had to listen to me. And so that was good for me and helped me build my brand in the marketplace. And so it's given me the opportunity, as Trina mentioned, to work with just some fantastic organizations. I was a part of the Colts Radio Network for 5 years. I've done the IHSAA championships. I did the Fever for 18 years, from 2000 to 2017. Was there when they won the title in 2012. And then, fortunately, IMS added me to their network back in the late 90s. And then, in 2006, got this wonderful opportunity to be the TV voice of the Pacers. So it's been really very cool to do it in your hometown. I moved to Westfield in 1977 when I was a high school junior. And my dad was a high school coach. He was my coach. And so I always knew I wanted to be in sports. Went to Wabash, played basketball, was a member of on the radio for 4 years. So it's just been a great run, and to be able to represent the Pacers here in Indianapolis has been tremendous. I made a choice 30-some years ago that I didn't want to move. I had some opportunities to take jobs elsewhere, but my wife and I were high school sweethearts from Westfield. We've been married 36 years. We have 3 boys, now 30, 28, and 24. And I was hopeful that I could do what I wanted to do here. Not knowing, that one day I'd be the voice of Butler or I'd be the voice of the Pacers. So it really, I try to tell young people all the time that if you have a dream, you can believe in it, and you got to work hard. There's no question about that. You gotta have champions. You have to have people in your corner. But all those things have been important for my career, and I'm glad I can do it for the Pacers now. I'll take questions, or if anybody, wants to know more, I can talk Pacers basketball, whatever. I'm happy to do it.
Any questions for Chris?
I'll ask one about, I'm an old Butler fan, and I'm so glad you stuck around after your Butler indoctrination into the broadcasting world, Chris. Where do you see Sabonis? I think we missed him terribly at the end of this season. Where is he in his recovery, and where are we going with him?
Yeah, that's a great question. During the press conference yesterday, Kevin Pritchard addressed that and said he's doing really, really well. In fact, he could play here in the offseason with his Lithuanian national team. So that means that, his health is good. You're right. That, what was disappointing about this past year is we really never got to see this team as we hoped, because Victor came back halfway through, and then Jeremy Lamb tore his ACL. And so he was going to be like the 6th man. And we all knew that when Victor came back, he was not going to be 100%. And then right before the stoppage, the pandemic, if you remember, I mentioned the Pacers went 4-1 on a road trip. I think they had won 12 out of their last 15 games. The 2 bigs, Miles Turner and Sabonis, were playing as well together as they had played all year. And then you fast forward to the restart, and Sabonis never plays, you know, it was an interesting time. And I think what was most disappointing about the playoffs is if you go to the restart, the Pacers had some really good wins. They started out and beat Philadelphia, who, you know, is a very good team with Embiid and Simmons. They beat the Lakers, who ended up to win the title, and they beat Houston. I mean, those were three really impressive wins in the restart of the regular season, and they did it without Sabonis. But yet when the postseason started, you could tell Miami, who made it to the finals, was really playing well. And I think, you know, I think the last 2 years was unfortunate for the Pacers from the standpoint, I thought they played against two of the best coaches in the league who in the playoffs make adjustments as well as anyone. And that's Brad Stevens in Boston and Eric Spoelstra in Miami. And so not having Sabonis, especially in the postseason, I thought really, really hurt. But I'm excited about the guys that are coming back. I know there's so much speculation about, you know, Victor Oladipo and his final year of his contract. But, you know, there are so many things that happen on the outside that, you know, people are trying to drum up for their own personal well-being, other teams, other media people, those types of things. I really want to see with Nate Bjorkgren, the new coach, this group play the way that Toronto plays. And when I say that, it's an exciting style. It's not just taking a lot of three-pointers. It's moving the ball. It's playing multiple defenses. It's willing to take chances and think outside the box. And I really think that this group will adapt to that. Here's the good news is Nate yesterday in his press conference said he has virtually talked to every player already, and players were initiating the phone calls. It wasn't Nate having to call them. It was players calling Nate because they know the success that he's had on the staff at Toronto. They know how he wants to play, and I think they're very excited about that. Thank you.
It helps.
Chris, this is Graham Honecker from Butler. Thank you for joining us and
Yes.
representing Butler so well. I have 3 questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The first one, and you kind of touched on it in hiring coaches, there seems to be 2 schools of thought in terms of, you know, giving an untested coach the opportunity versus, and I'm not trying to pick on him, but a Stan Van Gundy who's kind of been around, and would just love for you to touch on, you know, how those philosophies or those decisions tend to be made. Secondly, unfortunately, there have been some tough stories this year about, you know, Tom Brenneman, you know, and then I think over the weekend, Troy Aikman and maybe Joe Buck making comments about a flyover, and just, it's sad to me that someone can lose their entire career based on a comment, you know, when they think they're on the air. And I'd love to hear maybe your perspective on that and just how tight, you know, you've kept that in your career. And then finally, I was in French Lick for a couple of days this week, and I'm still just always amazed that Larry Bird came out of there. But wonder if he still has any involvement with the team. So sorry about the length of this.
Oh, no problem. I'll go backwards. Graham, talking about Larry, it is amazing. I need to get down to French Lick again. Have you played? Are you a golfer, Graham?
I'm not. I usually spend my whole time staring at Bird's childhood home when I'm down there.
You know, here's the thing. When Larry was around, he's still a consultant. He spends more time, I think, in Florida than anywhere else. I can just tell you that every time I got on an elevator with him, and again, I worked with him, and although I was always in awe, like, this is Larry Bird. This is Larry Bird. But Larry is still involved. I know that Kevin Pritchard uses him as a very reliable resource. Both he and Donnie Walsh, you know, are very important to the organization. But from a day-to-day perspective, Larry, I think, spends most of his time down in Naples. First question, it is interesting. I mean, if you think about it, and Graham, with Brad Stevens, when Danny Ainge reached out and plucked a guy that, again, was an excellent college coach, but had no NBA experience. And Brad's done very well because he knows the game so well. I think he's a savant. We always used to laugh when he was coaching Butler because a number of us with the Pacers, either, like me, did the Butler games or followed Butler. We would always watch those games in the first half, and we'd call it Brad Magic in the second half because we knew something was happening in the locker room that would turn the game, and usually it did. But I think a lot of these guys, the Spoelstras, the Nick Nurses, what I think Nate can do, what so many of these guys just know the game so much. And they're very in tune with analytics, but they also have a feel. I think it's got to be a merger. I don't think it can't be all analytics anymore. And what are analytics? Just numbers, letting the numbers sort of dictate things. I think you still have to know what's in your heart and what's in your head and how you deal with the game. And I think for the Pacers, Stan Van Gundy, where I'm sad is I thought Stan had this year done an excellent job on television. He was on TNT and was just so good. I think Stan will be more successful just as a coach than he was in Detroit when he was trying to be a coach and the president of basketball operations. So he's trying to make the personnel decisions and to coach. You can do that at the college level, when you recruit and coach, but at the NBA level to do all of that, I think is too difficult. But I think for the Pacers, they wanted to go the way that they've seen other teams go and utilize that. I don't even want to say a younger coach because I think Nate is 45 years old. It's not like he's in his 30s, but he just brings a different energy, his ability to think outside the box, his ability to take chances during games, to make changes. That's what you see a lot of these younger first-time coaches do, is they're just not locked into the same way to play. They feel like there are multiple different ways that you can play with the same personnel from one game to another. And so I think that's the philosophy that a lot of these organizations have. And I think that's, where the Pacers went. On your third point, the one in the middle, I'll just say this. I always treat the microphone as it's live, no matter if I'm in a commercial break, no matter if it's pregame, no matter if I'm on the air. I treat that mic like it is always on. And so during the course of a game, if it's not going particularly well and I'm frustrated and I want to say something to Quinn during the commercial break, like, I can't believe this is happening or whatever, I literally will take my headset off, put it down, cover the mic, and talk to Quinn. And, it's not using a cuss word or anything like that, but it may be saying something that I don't want somebody to hear because, I'm being critical of a player or whatever. It's just, a frustration. But I treat that mic like it is live all of the time. And, I think, we've read stories about Zoom calls, what people are doing on Zoom calls and all that. I mean, you just have to be very, very careful. It is too bad, for people that lose their jobs over situations like that. In some instances, I read where with the latest thing with Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, it happened before the game. It didn't even happen during a commercial break. I don't even know how that video or audio could even get out. There are some thoughts that they were set up in that situation, that somebody recorded it and then sent it out, which, is awful as well. But for me, I just know that as a broadcaster, I'm very fortunate to do what I do. I want to do this, as long as I can. I'm 59 years old. I'd like to do this another 10, I hope, as the voice of the Pacers. So I think you just have to take every precaution necessary. I mean, I don't think I'm a controversial person, so I don't feel I'll ever put myself in position like that. But if I am frustrated about a play, I'm going to make sure that, nobody hears it.
Thank you.
We had a question from, I believe, Pamela Rush asking how you think the players are affected by no people in the stands.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that they get the same rush that they would have if the stands were full and cheering or doing whatever.
Yeah, I talked to some of them, and again, for us, the other thing I was going to tell you during, the restart was, this is how I interacted with our players and coaches, Zoom. No personal relationship with them. I'm so used to going to practice, being on the road at the hotel, walking down to get a bite to eat. A couple of players are sitting in the lobby. I sit down with them for 5 to 10 minutes, just talk about life or whatever. And that's when you learn a lot about them as a person and as a player. And so for us, this is all I got. And so I know for them, they said it was strange. Chad Buchanan, our general manager, I did a Q&A with him at our golf outing a few weeks ago, and he said when it started and there were only like maybe 8 people in the building watching the game, he felt like it was a Broadway play put on particularly for him. I think for all of us that watched the games, or like me that did the games, I thought the presentation was excellent, because the way basketball is shot anyway, it's shot tight around the floor. And so with the virtual fans and that type of crowd noise, while it wasn't the same, it was far off, but it wasn't that far off. It was much different than watching a baseball game, where I'm a big Reds fan, and I'd put on Fox Sports Indiana or Fox Sports Ohio, and they're playing at Great American Ballpark, and there's 40,000 empty seats. I mean, there were some cardboard cutouts, I guess, and it just looked totally odd. Some of the football games with empty seats. So I think the advantage for the presentation in the bubble was very strong for the NBA, but the players did say it was very odd. It was like playing in summer league. It was almost like playing in a pickup game. But I give the players and the coaches a tremendous amount of credit, because I thought the games were very, very well played. I thought some of the games that I watched in the bubble were as good as I've ever seen. And the level of intensity was strong. And that was after, a layoff from March to late July. So hopefully they don't have to go into a true bubble again. I could easily see, because we don't know, it just seems like COVID as we move forward is going to get worse in the winter. There's been some talk about maybe creating divisional bubbles where, for instance, the Pacers, the Bulls, the Bucks, the Pistons, and the Cavs would all go to one site and play over a week or 2-week period. That would be a bubble, but it wouldn't be like what we saw back in August, September, and October.
Pamela, did that answer your last question? Or did you want to?
Yes, it did. As a matter of fact, it touched on the second one, so you can ignore that one. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other questions?
I have a quick one that's auto racing based. I got to go out to the Heartland Grand Prix at the Speedway, which was nice to finally get into that facility again. Is that something you think would be a model for the 500 next year if we're still not through all this COVID stuff?
I would think so. I mean, I think, it's almost like you take baby steps, and hopefully those baby steps get to be larger steps. And, I think everybody, I think is much smarter now how you have to handle things because of the experiences that you've gone through. I mean, for me, it's virtually the same. I mean, when I did the 500, when I did the Brickyard with no fans, honestly, once the race started, just like doing the games, I was so into what I needed to do that I didn't worry about fans. I mean, do fans make it more exciting? Absolutely. But during the 500, my job is to watch the cars coming out of turn 4 and painting you the picture, who's in the lead, who's trying to pass, those types of things. So the fans, while there's an energy, they don't impact what I'm trying to do. The same thing would be during the course of the games that we called in the bubble. Now, what you have to manage is your energy, because you don't have 17,000 fans around you and you're not playing off that energy. So, but I would think so, Eric, that hopefully that'll be a model as we go forward. You've started to see, I think the PGA Tour in Houston is going to have some fans in a few weeks before the Masters. So I think more and more protocols are put in place. The facility people, I can't even imagine the amount of hours that they're putting in getting ready for all these events. Let alone your workforce trying to get back into the building to work on an everyday basis.
Anyone else?
Chris, any thoughts on when the 2020-21 NBA season will start back up?
I think there's a thought process. It'll be January in some form. I think at one point they had talked about December, but then you're only looking at a little over 2 months. Well, it wouldn't even be a little over 2 months. Training camps would have to start 1st of December, and your 2 teams that have been in the finals wouldn't even have had, a month and a half break. Now, granted, they had that break from March to August. I think it'll be January. I mean, some people have speculated it could be later than that. I read where the NBA is meeting with its national TV partners right now to sort of map out the strategy for what they think. That'll be very important. TV is, as we all know, especially right now, it's very, very important. And what's interesting, there's been so much play about TV numbers being down. And if you do look at it, the NBA numbers were down, college football numbers are down, the World Series numbers are down. Footballs are down, maybe only about 10%, but still down. But if you look at sports on television in whole, those numbers are up. More people are watching TV sports. It's just that we've never had all of these things going on at once. I mean, there was at one point we had, I don't think it's ever happened in history. NBA, NHL, NFL, MLB, like everything was going on at the same time. So TV is going to be super important with how they determine, I think, when things start.
Does anyone else need to pick Chris's brain before we come to the end of the meeting?
There was one more question in the chat that I'll echo. To what extent has the decline in financial returns affected the viability of the game?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, there's no question. I mean, if you read through all of all the sports, numbers are down. Finances are down because you don't have ticket buyers. But I think all of these organizations and these leagues know that it's going to be a blip, and that you've got to push forward. I saw where the owner of the Dodgers said something about Major League Baseball, saying we don't really think we'll be back to normal until 2022. So that means they already know that the 2021 season will be different, but that hopefully by 2022 things will be back to normal. So, from a salary cap and those types of things, those things are above my pay grade. I just really try to focus on, what is in my wheelhouse, and my wheelhouse is making sure when the games start, I'm as prepared as anybody to do my job, and that's to do the games on television that you guys can watch.
Any further questions?
I've got one last one. I probably used my question, probably hit my capacity for the year. But Chris, I've really enjoyed the kind of the historic nights that the Pacers have done in terms of honoring the Indiana basketball history, and if there, do you see any stories that haven't been honored or covered yet, or anything that you'd like to see the Pacers recognize?
It's a good one, Graham. I mean, they've over the last 5 years, they have covered the gamut of basketball in our state. And, you know, what's been neat for me is I played high school basketball here. I played Division III basketball, worked at the University of Indianapolis, worked at Butler, you know, still stay in tune with the game. That's a good one. I'll have to think. You know, they've honored so many people. And, you know, one of the last ones that we did, and you just didn't see it very much recently, of course, was when Bob Knight and Gene Cady came out onto the floor at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. And this was, if you remember, just after Bob Knight had gone back to Bloomington and Assembly Hall. And, you know, that was fantastic to see that, because I thought it gave some closure to some open wounds that had been, you know, festering over time. But we've honored Tony Hinkle. We've honored the great teams at Crispus Attucks, Milan, Marion, Indiana, all the great basketball cities in our state. So I think they've done about all that they could do, but I'm sure there's somebody out there that they're thinking about that they'll honor in the future.
I'll ask one last quick one. Are you excited about the renovations to the field house?
I am. That was one of the interesting things is during August. So not only would we have to go in and have our temperature taken, you know, for COVID, we had to wear a hard hat and a vest to get down to the studio because there was so much construction in the building. And I do think they're going to take the best basketball venue in the world and make it even better. Rick Fuson gave Quinn Buckner and I a tour one day, just in some of the various areas. There will be spots that you will walk in if you've been in the building a lot like I have, that you'll go, this is totally different. But I still think the feel of the building will be wonderful. But again, people consume and watch games differently now, even in the building. People want to stand. People want to be able to move about. It's just like how people consume games now. People watch games on their phone, on their iPad, on their computers. I don't know how many of you, when you're watching a sporting event, you're on Twitter, you're on Facebook. Big Ten Network did a study a couple of years ago that said 65 to 70% of the people that watch sporting events have a second screen because they're enjoying it with friends. And I think that's even happened more now because you can't watch it with friends. I mean, you're watching it at home. So I'm excited about the field house. I guess for us, I keep thinking with what's happened with COVID, where will we be though? I can see us in the early goings. I'm not going to be sitting courtside. I'm going to be somewhere a little bit removed from the field house. But again, as I've said, as long as I can do the games, I'm happy.
Anyone else?
There was a question about the All-Star game. It's canceled for sure, correct?
I believe, I don't think they've officially canceled it, but they did release the hotel rooms for, I mean, it would not be in February. I mean, I've read some things where they may not even have an All-Star game next year because of the way they're going to need to condense the schedule. So, as far as I know, yes, there will not be an All-Star game in Indianapolis. I would believe, I think the next two are set. It's like anything else, they would, add it. Maybe we'd have it in 2024. Or I don't want to be held to that, but I think we all know that the NBA released the hotel rooms that were necessary to host the All-Star game. And the All-Star game is always in mid-February. And if the season starts in January, you'd never have the All-Star game that early.
Chris, what kind of a negative impact do you think the COVID disease is going to have on downtown Indianapolis?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I mean, with so many people, like this, we're all sort of working from home. I mean, I work from home anyway. I mean, I'm down at the field house for games and those types of things. I hope it doesn't have a negative impact because, we all know what a great downtown we've had. We have great athletic venues. We have great restaurants. The convention business is so important to Indianapolis. I think we're all just hopeful that we get past this, that we do our due diligence. We're smart. We wear masks. We do all the things that we need to do to stay healthy so that whatever time we return to normal, we get back to some kind of normal. It may not be the normal we've always had, but hopefully we've all learned from this and we move forward.
I'll say amen to that.
Yeah.
Any last questions before we let Chris return to his whatever he needs to do from his home? Chris, I've just been fascinated by this. I love sports, and I don't have any season tickets, so I haven't been able to attend in person. But I'm basically relieved by what you've told us. So I think everybody is really happy that you were able to give your time to us today. I was muted there for a minute. So you didn't hear that I said that we're going to send you a certificate of appreciation. And in your name, we're going to make a donation to Project 44.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is an Indianapolis-based nonprofit created to raise awareness of the National Bone Marrow Donor Registry and the need for donors and the impact of donations on children and adults who are in need of such help. Thank you once again. It was wonderful to have you with us. I'm going to be wishing everyone who was able to attend a good rest of the week. We will be hosting another Zoom meeting next week on October 29th with Ryan Vaughn, president of Indiana Sports Corps, with us. So of course, we're all looking forward to that next meeting. Once again, have a great week, everybody.